They didn't just build planes, they built confidence. For a century, Boeing defined safety, precision, and American engineering, and then piece by piece, that legacy shattered. In just 2 crashes, 346 people died. Entire nations grounded a flagship aircraft. Boeing lost more than $80 billion in value. Every headline carried the same message: something fundamental had collapsed. This wasn't turbulence. This was a structural failure inside the soul of an empire. Picture this. October 2018. A brand new 737 MAX plunges into the ocean. 5 months later, another one falls from the sky. 2 tragedies. Same model, same flaw, same warning ignored. The world watched a giant burn in slow motion. When investigators opened Boeing's internal files, the truth was brutal. Shortcuts, pressure, and a system that allowed a single faulty sensor to overpower trained pilots. Decisions made years earlier now detonated at full force.
Ow.
This is not a story about accidents. This is a story about a culture that drifted, leaders who gambled, and a company that believed it could outrun consequences. And this is where the fall truly begins. Long before the headlines turned dark, Boeing stood at the peak of global aviation. Founded in 1916, it grew from a wooden seaplane workshop into a symbol of American power, engineering, and ambition. For decades, Boeing didn't follow the industry, it led it. Every breakthrough, every iconic aircraft, every leap forward in commercial flight carried one name: Boeing. By the late 20th century, the company dominated more than half of the global commercial aircraft market. Its jets connected continents. Its factories in Washington became legendary. Airlines fought to buy Boeing's next model because customers trusted it blindly. Safety wasn't just a promise. It was a reputation built over millions of flawless flight hours. Then came the golden era. It's a 77, it's a 77, it's a 747. Each one a cultural icon shaping travel, tourism, and global business. Airports filled with Boeing silhouettes. Movies featured Boeing cockpits. Children pointed at the sky and recognized the hump of a 747 instantly. Boeing wasn't just a company. It was aviation's heartbeat. Its influence extended far beyond commercial flight. Defense contracts, space programs, satellites, NASA missions. Washington officials viewed Boeing as a national jewel. Too strategic to fail. It's too important to question. That confidence allowed Boeing to grow even bigger, pushing its market value into tens of billions and creating an empire that seemed unshakable. Inside the company, engineers were rock stars. Precision was sacred. The culture was simple: build the safest machine in the sky, no matter the cost. And for a long time, that philosophy worked. Airlines trusted Boeing's reliability. Passengers never wondered who made the plane. They assumed Boeing meant safe.
Behind the glory, the seeds of a different future were forming.
Quiet shifts. Leadership changes. Strategic pivots that felt harmless at first. Decisions that looked efficient on paper, but came with a price the world wouldn't see until decades later, because every empire falls long before the world notices. And Boeing's fall had already begun. This is where everything went wrong. The fatal mistake didn't happen in a cockpit. It happened in a boardroom. Years before the crashes, Boeing made a strategic decision shaped by pressure, competition, and fear of losing ground to Airbus. When the A320neo took the market by storm, Boeing needed a response. Fast. But instead of designing a new aircraft, executives chose to upgrade the aging 737 platform. It looked efficient on paper. It looked urgent in strategy. But it introduced risks that would later dominate global investigations. Larger engines changed the aircraft's aerodynamics. The nose tended to pitch upward. To address this, Boeing introduced MCAS, a software-based solution designed to automatically push the nose down. Investigators later found that MCAS relied on a single-angle Levitac sensor, design choice that became a central focus of global scrutiny. What was meant to be a stabilizing mechanism became the most controversial system in modern aviation. Inside Boeing, internal documents revealed tension. Engineers raised concerns. Some questioned the training requirements, others worried about complexity. but management prioritized schedule and certification timelines. Regulators approved Boeing submissions based on the information provided at the time, a process later criticized by oversight bodies for insufficient independent scrutiny. Speed, efficiency, and market pressure formed a perfect storm. After the first crash in 2018, Boeing maintained confidence in the aircraft, citing procedural issues and emphasizing existing safety measures. But 5 months later, the second crash forced the world to re-examine every assumption. 2 tragedies, same system, same aerodynamics, the same chain of decisions converging at one point. The mistake was not a single sensor, not a single system. It was a constellation of choices, cultural, strategic, and structural, made over years. Choices that accumulated quietly until the consequences could no longer be contained. And once the world saw the pattern, the fall of Boeing was no longer a question of if. It was a question of how far. The backlash was instant and unforgiving. When the second 737 MAX went down in March 2019, the reaction was global. Governments, airlines, regulators, passengers, everyone moved at once. China grounded its MAX fleet within hours. Europe followed. Canada, Australia. Finally, the United States. Within 3 days, 387 aircraft were forced out of service. The MAX shifted overnight from Boeing's commercial crown jewel to its greatest liability. Online, the response was explosive. Analysts, influencers, aviation experts, and celebrities joined the conversation. Tech investor Arun Putter posted a line that spread across platforms: executives enriched, workers fired, planes crash. It captured the public frustration toward what many saw as a corporate culture in crisis. Media outlets intensified the scrutiny. BBC, WSJ, and industry commentators like John Ostrow described Boeing as a company facing the consequences of long-term cultural drift. Some reports highlighted decades of tension between engineering teams and executive leadership, fueling a narrative of misalignment between safety priorities and business goals. Then came the wave of attention around whistleblowers. John Barnett, Joshua Dean. Their passing sparked intense discussion on social media, with online communities debating the circumstances and expressing concern, though no official investigation has concluded wrongdoing by Boeing. The reaction amplified distrust and kept Boeing at the center of the global spotlight. Protests appeared outside airports. Pilots' unions demanded structural reforms. Passengers refused to board MAX aircraft. Airlines struggled to reroute fleets, absorbing additional fuel costs and delays. Regulators launched deeper investigations. The FAA tightened oversight. Congress held hearings. The story evolved from an aviation incident into a worldwide examination of corporate governance. One viral comment summed up the sentiment: Boeing didn't just fail, it lost the world's trust. The backlash wasn't noise, it was the world drawing a line. If emotion can be debated, numbers cannot. And the numbers behind Boeing's collapse are devastating. Start with the human cost. 346 lives lost across 2 crashes, families shattered, investigations spanning continents. No statistic cuts deeper than that. But the financial damage that followed reveals the true scale of the disaster. Boeing bled money at a pace no one thought possible. $20 billion in direct costs, fines, legal fees, compensation, settlements. $60 billion in indirect losses, canceled orders, production delays, and the erosion of long-term trust. That is $80 billion erased from an empire once seen as untouchable. Deliveries collapsed nearly 50% in early 2024. Production plans were slashed from 52 jets per month to 42, before halting entirely in 2020. Airlines walked away. More than 1,000 planes were removed from Boeing's backlog, either canceled outright or reclassified. The MAX, once projected to be the best-selling aircraft in history, became a dead weight dragging the company's future down. Investors felt the shock next. Boeing stock dropped 30% over 5 years, settling around $180. It's an astonishing fall for a company that once defined American industrial might. Cash flow evaporated. Losses piled up for 5 consecutive years, reaching an estimated $2.8 billion in 2025. For an aerospace giant, that isn't a setback. That's decay. And the damage kept spreading. Passenger confidence hit historic lows. Insurance risks soared toward the $200 billion mark in worst-case models. Even global supply chains trembled as contractors and partner nations felt Boeing's instability ripple outward. These numbers don't describe a stumble. They describe a collapse. Slow, systemic, and brutally expensive. To understand Boeing's collapse, we must look beyond the crashes. The roots stretch back decades, into boardrooms, strategic pivots, and cultural shifts that gradually eroded a once-uncheckable legacy. This wasn't a sudden failure. It was a long, quiet unraveling. The shift began in the late 1990s. Boeing started prioritizing shareholder value more aggressively. Outsourcing expanded. Cost efficiency became central. When headquarters moved from Seattle to Chicago in 2001, leaders were literally separated from the factory floors. Engineers warned about losing visibility into real production challenges. Analysts later argued this geographic and cultural distance weakened Boeing's engineering-driven identity. Then came Airbus. The A320neo's fuel savings triggered panic across the airline industry. Airlines placed massive orders. Boeing needed a response immediately. But instead of developing a new aircraft, leadership chose a faster route. Modify the 737, an airframe originally designed in the 1960s. The decision aligned with market pressure, but it forced the engineering team to work within severe constraints. MCAs was introduced as a software-based solution to address pitch-up tendencies created by larger engines, according to investigative reports. The system, its reliance on a single sensor and its limited visibility in pilot materials became central issues in global discussions. What began as an attempt to maintain commonality with older models instead created a layer of complexity few fully understood until it was too late. Regulatory oversight also became a major focus. FAA approved Boeing's certification materials based on the information presented, a process later criticized by Congress. DOT and NTSB for lacking independent rigor. Multiple investigations questioned whether years of collaboration between Boeing and FAA had created a culture of over-reliance, reducing the depth of external scrutiny. The problems didn't stop after the crashes. Manufacturing inconsistencies, including loose bolts and structural misalignments, raised new questions about Boeing's production oversight. When a door plug blew out on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 in 2024, global attention intensified again. Each incident amplified public perception that Boeing was struggling to maintain quality control across its supply chain. At the core of this pattern was a deeper issue: incentives. Executives were evaluated heavily on financial metrics: speed, cost, deliveries. These pressures shaped decision-making at every level. Culture followed incentives. And when incentives drift away from engineering excellence, the consequences are unavoidable. In the end, Boeing's crisis wasn't caused by one flaw, one choice, or one system. It was the result of a culture that moved away from what made the company great, and a reminder that in aviation, even small deviations compound into disaster. When the crisis unfolded, the consequences reverberated through Boeing's highest offices. Inside the executive floors, strategy sessions turned urgent. Press briefings intensified. Every decision was scrutinized. And the leadership that once oversaw Boeing's rise now faced the reality of its decline. In 2024, CEO Dave Calhoun stepped down as Boeing confronted a new wave of quality concerns. His tenure included the MAX recertification period, production slowdowns, and rising regulatory pressure. Analysts and industry observers argued that Boeing's leadership structure was no longer aligned with the demands of a safety-critical industry. The need for cultural and operational reform became impossible to ignore. Internally, the company launched a series of structural changes. Managers were shifted. Production oversight teams expanded. Entire departments were reorganized. Boeing also moved to acquire Spirit AeroSystems for $4.7 billion, an acknowledgement of the fragmentation created by previous outsourcing strategies. The acquisition signaled an attempt to regain direct control over critical manufacturing processes. Regulators added even more pressure. The FAA tightened certification authority. Congressional committees demanded testimony. Pilot unions pushed for training and oversight reforms. Each stakeholder questioned whether Boeing's leadership model could support the industry's safety expectations. The fallout wasn't about a single executive. It was a reassessment of the entire leadership philosophy. And as the board sought a new direction, one message echoed across the industry: real recovery requires more than new leadership. It requires a new culture. Every collapse leaves a lesson. But Boeing's collapse leaves several land. They cut deeper than any financial loss. At its core, this story isn't about software, sensors, or certification delays. It's about what happens when a company forgets the values that made it great. The first lesson is simple. You cannot build trust on shortcuts. Boeing tried. It tried to patch a structural problem with software. It tried to reduce training to save money. It tried to accelerate certification to beat Airbus. Every shortcut looked efficient in the moment. Every shortcut became catastrophic in the end. The second lesson: culture is destiny. When Boeing shifted from engineering excellence to shareholder obsession, everything else followed. Safety weakened. Quality slipped. Decisions drifted away from the factory floor and into conference rooms. And once culture breaks, no amount of PR can fix it. Culture is the foundation. When it cracks, the entire structure collapses. The third lesson is broader. Transparency isn't optional. It's oxygen. The moment Boeing hid MCAs, minimized concerns, and softened internal warnings, it sealed its fate. Trust once broken rarely returns. And in an industry where lives are at stake, the cost of hiding the truth is measured in more than dollars. In the end, Boeing's story reminds every business, every leader, every brand: when you betray your values, the world will eventually notice. And when you betray your customers, they will walk away, sometimes forever. Boeing's fall is more than a business case. It's a warning one every company should fear. But now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Boeing can ever return to the company it once was? Or has the damage already gone too deep? If you want more dramatic stories of empires rising and collapsing, make sure to subscribe. Your support helps us dig deeper, investigate harder, and bring you the business stories others won't tell. And tell me in the comments, which company should we uncover next?